Yeah, just throw the receipt in the bag. That's more of a GameStop thing than a Switch thing. And then people are like, why didn't they like package it better? So it's like, oh yeah, well, how come people are puncturing the box?
Yeah.
Before you get it.
Butterscotch.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 524 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Matt, I'm the miscellaneous programmer.
I'm Sam and I'm there.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today's June 6th, 2020 vibes. Before we get started, we have a warning. There's going to be profanity in this show. We'd also like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. Thank you so much for your monthly donations to help keep this podcast going.
Yeah.
All right. So news-wise, we want to talk, this episode, we want to talk about the Switch 2, and we want to talk a little bit about the Crashlands 2 1.2 patch in the sense that we're just going to say that we're going to talk about it next episode.
Mm-hmm. But we're going to talk about the fact that we're talking about that now, though.
Yeah,
we'll get
and then probably next episode when we talk about it, we'll talk about the fact that this episode we said that we were going to talk about it then.
Yep. Yeah, just to make sure everyone fully understands. So
that's pretty clear, right?
Yeah,
that's what I wrote down on the script. We have a strict script that we follow, and this is what we wrote. So
that's how we keep it organized. Make it clear. You don't want to be communicating poorly. So,
but the patch is coming along. We got lots of cool shit in it. But we'll talk about that next episode. However, if you want to get a taste of it, we will be putting it into a Steam beta channel, which you'll be able to get access to via information that will be posted in the Butterscotch Discord. So if you're looking to get a fun new Crashlands 2 experience, like the new Scramble and Hardcore mode, plus a bunch of other cool stuff, then make sure you're in the Discord and be ready. Be ready for that announcement to drop. It'll drop sometime a little bit after this episode airs. So that's all we're going to say about Crashlands 2 for now, because it's Switch 2 time. Yeah. Let's talk about the Switch 2.
Speaking of sequels.
Yeah.
All
right. So the Switch 2, it's bigger, it's better, it's slightly brighter, it's got magnets, It
has a mouse.
It's a Switch.
It has two mice.
It's a Switch.
Yep. In fact, two mice is the ultimate hacker move. You bust those off. You just start doing stuff with both.
I once saw somebody write up this big. I don't know if you guys have spent any time in the indie gaming community, like on Reddit or anywhere else, but like every now and then people come in just guns blazing with the most unhinged idea, thinking like this is so fucking cool. And somebody had like a 2-mouse game idea where you had to like plug in 2 mice and like use both. And on the one hand, I'm like,
does an operating system even support that?
I don't know. I've never tried it.
You don't have 2 independent cursors. Yeah. Really
yeah. And there's all kinds of bullshit. Like a lot of mice are right hand oriented, right? Well, like, so you would need to get like a left-handed mouse or whatever for your other hand.
Also, no one's ambidextrous, so like,
what's great about that is that a controller with 2 joysticks is
pretty similar.
That's supposed to get. You could just do that. So why you gotta be weird about it?
I don't know, but like I kind of like of course this is somebody who had never programmed a game before or even made one. It was like one of these ideas people who just comes in and like, I don't know why nobody's talking about making a game like this, and then everybody proceeds to tell them all the reasons why nobody's talking about. Anyways,
it would make a good alt control delete or whatever the
alt control
GDC.
GDC. For everybody who doesn't know about that thing, at GDC, there's on the show floor, there's always this fun little session, or I don't know, whatever you call it.
It's a booth, I guess.
It's just a bunch of weird.
Yeah, that hosts a bunch of like fun, like physically experimental games. I don't mean physical like a board game, but like it's an electronic game with weird control schemes that are like a weird physical experience and stuff. And there's like just some delightfully weird stuff that's in there.
So this is a good one year where they took like one of those tunnels that you get like have kids playing, and then they wired it so you had to be a caterpillar and like wiggle around in there to do stuff.
They hooked sensors up to it so that they could tell the bends in the tube.
Right.
And then there was like an iPad screen or something that you would see be laying on your back in this wire tube thing. And you could look up and you could see the caterpillar that you are playing as, and then you had to like writhe around on the ground and bend this tube.
Honestly, fucking awesome.
The funny thing about all that stuff is like it almost always barely works. Yeah. You know, like the concept is always so much cooler than the execution because like nobody's really investing a lot of time into these things. They're just kind of goofy projects.
Well, when you bring stuff into the physical space like that, the limitations and complexities are so
it gets pretty difficult.
Well, actually, let's talk about that because it's related to the Switch. Weirdly enough, which is that it's been an interesting break in tradition. Okay, from Nintendo. And I think this is the talking point. Largely, I think, on the dev side.
Yeah. So what is the tradition? What is Nintendo's tradition?
Nintendo's tradition, as everybody knows, is to launch an absolute banger of an innovative console. And then the next time they do a console launch something so weird and abstract that nobody uses it. And then the next time, another banger, right? So
they follow the Windows operating system model, right? It's like every other one, just make it almost unusably bizarre. You know,
100%. And what's interesting about that, though, is that the Switch 2 then is the first one that they made that is actually a successor, just in terms of essentially it's an improved version of the Switch, right? It's just more powerful, whatever. Has some of these more usability features. It has some extra little stuff, but it's not fundamentally different, right? In the way that like
it's almost like the in the olden days when we had like the Game Boy and then the Game Boy Pocket and then the Game Boy Color, right? It's like they're all backwards compatible with the same cartridges and
just different approaches.
You got the same buttons, same form factors, it's just better. It's a better version of the same thing.
Yeah.
You know?
And so what's interesting to me about that is like, I mean, one, obviously the Switch did really, really well, right? So I can't remember if it was the best selling one now, like, because they took them around to beat the Wii.
A big part of that was just $300.
Yeah.
Which is pretty good.
But they basically decided to actually go with this, kind of like what everybody else is doing, frankly, in the console space, which is like Xbox or PlayStation. It's not like they change, frankly, anything about how the games are played. They might add, again, like these little enhancements. So, more rumble control shit, or like there's now on, PlayStation, there's a little touch screen on the mouse that like nobody uses. So there's,
on the controller.
Yeah. So there's stuff like that. It's like basically first party titles will make use of them in some interesting ways, but they're never like a core gimmick of the game because of course nowadays the reality is that with digital being kind of the primary way that everybody gets their games, whether it's on console or PC, there's this interesting thing where like as a dev, you don't want to make something that's like so homebrew for a particular console that you couldn't possibly port it somewhere else.
Well, this was the problem with the Wii U.
Yes.
Like the Wii U was a 2-screen device. It was like having a Switch that also hooked up to your TV at the same time and you had to play on both screens at once, kind of.
Yes.
Which if you make a game that requires that,
then you can't
bring it to other platforms, right? And so you didn't want to develop for it.
And that's kind of the benefit that Nintendo's had, right, in the past, which is like if you make a weird tech thing that is, and you do manage to make it very successful because you are also making games, that's kind of required, right? You have to have vertical integration there. Like if they were just a hardware maker making like the Wii, but didn't have Wii Sports, you know what I mean? Like at launch, it would just be dead because who cares, right? No one's gonna again take the gamble.
Well, you see this happen with like Apple, for example, right? Because they like to launch new kinds of technical features.
Yeah, Vision Pro is a good example. Yeah.
Or I was even thinking like 3D Touch, right? Which were back when Apple launched 3D Touch on iPhone, it was this. They were really trying to get game developers to use it, and we were like, why would we design a mechanic around this? There's a bunch of reasons why we wouldn't, just because of what that is, because like you can't feel how hard you're like.
Right.
It's not a good mechanism for a game mechanic, but even if it was, if we designed a game around that, it can only work on iPhone. That's the only place it could work.
Right. So it's a huge benefit to Nintendo if they manage to do it, though, right? When that's what you see, which is like the case of the Wii, just doing crazy numbers on the console side. If they're able to support it effectively enough with first-party titles, which used to be all there was, right? There didn't used to be this indie market. Then you get this lock-in effect where like all the devs who make stuff, everything becomes exclusive, right? Because the form factor is just so weird. So Switch 2 then is like, it's just kind of an expansion of the previous stuff and really a big deviation from their model. But I think what's interesting is like nowadays, because it's like a combination of like, because everyone else in the space is also not innovating on form factor stuff. And because the industry's in a spot where like making games is harder than ever. Like making games is easier than ever, but like successfully selling them and surviving is hard. Then devs are not interested in taking crazy gambles. We're not interested, maybe can't, take crazy gambles that aren't like fronted by Nintendo themselves or like paid for by the platform.
Well, and all platformers want to make sure they can get a piece of whatever big game release comes out, which means that game will have to be able to be ported to their platform, whatever.
Exactly.
Whatever
it's like, could you, if you had, so let's say that there was some other new Wii equivalent fucking weird thing that Nintendo had done this time around, and it's like, could they put Cyberpunk on it? No, like literally just no. You know what I mean? Like you don't have enough buttons. It's just like a weird thing. So you wouldn't be able to take advantage of the fact that now we've kind of homogenized, right, the hardware space a bunch in the way that,
well, and even the Switch, the fact that like, so we have Levelhead on the Switch and we have Crashlands on the Switch, which in theory that also means it's on Switch too, but we don't have a dev kit, so we can't verify. But the genius of the Switch was that it does adhere to the normal form factor.
yes,
but it has some bonuses, right? Because it still has 2 joysticks. It's got a controller. It's got the 4 right thumb buttons. It's got the bumpers and triggers.
You can take it on the go with you, right? That was the shtick, right?
Well, and the big challenge though is like, so like in the case of Levelhead has couch co-op, and we had to update all Crashlands. Yeah, it's like we have to update all of the interfaces to be able to work, whether you have a full controller or whether you've chopped your controller in half and only have half the buttons that you normally have, which is a huge undertaking.
Oh yeah.
And so like not every game on Switch supports that necessarily, but it was like a nice benefit that the Switch had where they stuck to the same formula as every other console in terms of the controller. They just added like a layer.
Yeah, very clever, right? Very clever, and they won. Yeah. They won a big prize for that. I think what's interesting then is the pressures of the market currently are also such that, like, from a player perspective, and you see a lot of gripes about this already. You don't like everyone has a library now. Frankly, for the last at least the last 10 years or so, right? Since largely this last console generation, because there weren't really many hardware changes and because everything's shifted to digital. The idea that if I get a new console or something, that I would not be able to play anything that I purchased in the last 10 years on it is like kind of it's a crazy thing. It's almost like having a startup in the console space now. You know what I mean? Where you're like, please buy our stuff. Which means you'd have to have like just absolute like insane support on the first party side simultaneously with launch. Kind of like what you saw with the original Switch, right? Like you're launching with like Legend of Zelda, Mario, like a bunch of these things just day one to get people in there. And it's interesting to me that you don't see that. You just see Mario Kart this time around, right? Yeah,
there's a lot of like, if you look at like, I was looking up lists of like the best games to play on Switch 2, and almost every game in the list is games that have already been out.
Yep.
Or they have like a Switch 2 edition, like the Zelda games have updated editions that are better on the Switch 2, but it is the same game, right? It's a weird thing about digital versus physical. Is that if you're a player and you like back in the Nintendo NES days, you had a physical box and then you had a physical cartridge that obviously fit into that slot, right? And so when you got your Super Nintendo, you weren't like, what the fuck? Why doesn't this
It wasn't even
work?
A question, right? Because you're like,
because you would look at it and you're like, it doesn't fit.
Yeah, it's like a square peg round hole. It's like not gonna work out.
So if you wanted to play your Nintendo games, you'd get out your Nintendo, and if you want to play your Super Nintendo games, you'd get your Super Nintendo, and that's how you did it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's never a thought that crossed the mind. You know what I mean? Because it like
it didn't make sense. But digital has the same problems, which is like if it's different hardware, if it's a different store or whatever, it does have to be a different piece of software to run on it. Yes. And we even get this with like people really don't understand how that works, because we even get people being like, I bought the game on Steam. Why can't I just like have it on iOS or whatever? Right? Like why can't it just run on there? It's like, well, it's a different operating system. It's two different businesses operate those stores. Like it is the same game, and I understand,
But I guess interestingly and importantly, it's not, because like the reality is from a dev standpoint, in order to, even if we could support that, right? And I think you see this with Xbox nowadays. Like Xbox has been pushing that play anywhere thing, right? Quite a bit. And the big idea there is if a game that's on Xbox and on PC simultaneously, and then like potentially has cloud support so you can play it on mobile. That's the whole play anywhere combo. But the reality is like each one of those is extended dev time, because again, it's not just like
wildly different constraints and design requirements and
even
optimization requirements.
Let's say even if you didn't have any controls issues to think about, which is crazy. The hardware is so different. We've talked about this before, but like getting Crashlands 2 to run really efficiently on mobile is a tremendous undertaking before you even step into the controls aspect that you have to deal with, right?
Well, so the reality is RAM. Yeah. Like RAM is just not, it's never been a concern for us on anything except iOS.
Yes.
And as soon as we're bringing stuff to iOS, suddenly it's all we think about, and we have to do everything possible. Like we're still working on it. I think we just found a thing that might shave 200 megabytes of RAM off,
which is huge,
which is massive because the game is only a 1 fucking gigabyte of RAM, which for a PC game, you're like, oh, that's less than Chrome.
Yep.
You know, by a wide margin.
Well, it's less than one Chrome tab.
One Chrome tab, but on an iOS device, it just causes the game to crash because there's just not enough RAM on the device, right? So you can't just take the same exact game and just plop it onto a
well, this is what I think
device.
is interesting. So on the Microsoft side, they're pushing really hard for the like Xbox Play Anywhere stuff. But when you go to sell the game, you as a dev, you don't get to sell it for more, actually. Does that make sense? Like if we're indie,
because you did all that extra work, nobody gives a shit.
Nobody gives a fuck. So it's like, and Microsoft they don't give us I think they give a better percent on the the Windows store, whatever the fuck it's called now, the Xbox PC store, like 12% instead of 30% for Steam. So like, yeah, technically you could be like, we are making some more money if we sold copies there. But to be honest with you, not fucking near enough to pay for, if the market's small, it doesn't matter. But like generally wouldn't be not near enough to pay for like the full optimization and control suite that you need to really do to do a game well on a different device. Right. And so,
well, this is also why you see a game that is extremely successful will do all of these things, because for them, even a 5% lift could be
an absolute
$1 million, right? Or whatever. Yes. Yeah. And so the hugely popular games end up on everything because it's worth that upfront dev cost to make it work. But if you're anywhere beyond underneath like the most successful titles in history, then most of the time, the dev costs of coming to these like weird, very specific sub platforms of a platform or whatever, right?
It's almost like
are just a loss.
The dev needs to get paid on a per platform basis, if that makes sense. Like from a dev cost standpoint. But if you do this like play anywhere thing that Xbox has been pushing, the dev is not getting paid on a per platform basis.
Yeah, if it's buy the game once and then you can play it on everything, and now the dev has to do all the extra work to make it playable on everything. Yes. But they only sell one copy per player.
Actually, I don't think we talked about Google Play having its PC version of the store.
Google Play did the PC. I think we mentioned it
because that launched like last week or like a few weeks ago. Like it actually is available now. That if
I haven't actually heard anything about it.
Yeah, if you play stuff on Google Play, you can now get Google Play on Windows at least. I'm not sure if it's on either platform, but you can get on Windows and basically they default opted in every game on Google Play to now being supposedly playable on the PC version of Google Play. We opted all of our games out for exactly these reasons. Is we're like, we don't know what that means. We don't know if we can because you're playing with a mouse and keyboard now, right?
Yeah, except on a touch device, you don't show a cursor because you can't, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, how would you use a mouse if you can't see where the mouse
and they just opted everybody into that, right? Which can't possibly be a good experience.
They even opted in. We have some projects in Google Play that are just test projects that are used for integration testing.
Butterscotch pipeline, like those are the application names.
Yeah, and they fucking opted those in even, and we're like, what is? These aren't even published. These aren't even available to players normally.
Yeah, so I think what's interesting is like you have the platforms that are pushing more and more to have it be the case that anywhere that because everyone's trying to do play anywhere stuff, right? Then to some degree. I mean, you have this on iOS also, like with the Mac App Store. They've been doing this universal app thing now. They've been doing it for a while, but like the Mac and App Stores type things have kind of smooshed together in a lot of ways. And so you can, in theory, you could basically we could turn Crashlands 2 into a game that like I think you just buy it. You can have the option of making it one purchase or like a different scale of purchase if it's played on both, at least in their case, which is I think nice. But everyone's trying to do this thing.
Which I think Google Play, is going to be doing as they roll out their like PC support stuff is having like kind of multiple kinds of purchase options or something.
That would make the most sense, right? I mean, in any of these cases, even on Xbox, it make the most sense. If you're like, I want to be able to play this, I do want to be able to play this on everything. That costs like an extra $5, on the base sale of the game.
And that is what we tell people too. It's part of what people complain about on occasion about our games is that they're more expensive on PC than on mobile, and the core reason for that is just the is just the market differences between these platforms and what pricing looks like and player expectations are, right? But the other one is that we want people to get the game on both. That actually is true. And so if the game costs the same amount between those two platforms, then you're paying, $50 or whatever to get the game. To get the game once is what it feels like as a player, right?
Yeah,
so if we could do it in a way where it's more price accessible by like having a bit of extra cost to do it.
I think what's funny to me about it is like nobody wants to pay for it. You know what I mean? The platforms don't want to pay us more to do this.
No.
Players don't want to pay it. Everyone's just like, I got it. I got the game. So why
can't I have it everywhere?
Yeah. The ideal scenario for the platform is get rid of these developers and just have the players just send us money sort of directly.
100%.
So,
I think
it's not ideal for us though.
Yeah, I think we're entering into just an interesting era. I think with that whole like the reality of the library that people are carrying with them and how in many ways I think it's largely going to constrict hardware changes going forward. And now that Nintendo's opted into it too, which frankly is smart given where things are going, like in the current timeline. I don't think it would be a wise business case at all for them to be like, we're doing some other weird shit now,
Yeah, and when we were looking at the sales numbers for the Switch 2, and it's selling very well, and it's going to sell, I think, they're projecting maybe like 13 to 15 million units by the end of the year, which is great, and also super, super tiny compared to something like Steam, right? Mm-hmm. Which I think was like 60 million daily users or something like
30
that.
30 or something. It's a lot.
Yeah. So like if you look at like the top, 10 games on Steam, probably the number of players playing them at peak hours adds up to more than the total number of Switches that will be sold this whole year. Right. And so if Nintendo did turn around and say like, oh yeah, well for our next trick, we're going to release the Nintendo hula hoop, and it's a VR goggle with a hula hoop, and then you strap bands to your arms and you flail around like a wacky inflatable tube person. And that's our new console, and people have to make games for it, right? Then like, even if they sold 3 times as many units of that as they're selling of the Switch 2, they would really struggle to get developers to make shit for it, just like the Wii U.
We'll get it because if you make a game for it and it's locked in because of hardware, well, like the design is locked in because of the hardware.
Then however much money Nintendo gets you, that's how much money you get. That's it.
And full offense to Nintendo, they're not doing a good job on the indie side of things, making people money these days. So, and that doesn't seem to have changed with the Switch 2. You know what I mean? No. They were like, hardware's different. eShop, burning pile of garbage. Still.
Well, and that's earlier this year is one of those interesting talking points in the games industry was hopefully the Switch 2 can save us, right? With like it's going to create it's like the idea of it being a new market because everything is so saturated. Whether we'll have another blue sky opportunity or whatever, right?
And importantly, the indie space on Switch was fantastic for about a year or two post like initial launch of Switch because the number of games coming to it was small enough that their lack of discovery mechanisms didn't really matter too much. But then since then, it's been just increasingly a garbage pile. It's just like it's really rough. It's really hard to actually.
Yeah, I'd say Nintendo. I mean, it has the same problem as mobile.
Yes,
right. Which
no
is
surfacing mechanisms for indie stuff. Basically.
Yeah, it's just whatever floats to the top stays on the top. I guess Nintendo's a bit worse than mobile because they're publishing first party titles that they want to promote. Again, like we just said, if you as a platform could just cut out the developers and just get the money directly, right? Like that's what Nintendo wants to do, which is like they themselves have these first party titles, they get all the revenue from those, and then if they don't surface our games, then they get 3 times as much money on the sale, right? So so it's we don't have a Switch 2 dev kit. I'm curious to see how Levelhead in particular runs on it, because like one of the things that kind of sucked about the Switch, the original Switch, and also about the Steam Deck is they're not HD. The Switch was like 720p, I think, and then the Steam Deck is like 800.
Yeah, so like when you're playing any of our games on a phone, they look just so good.
Crisp.
Yeah,
looks so good.
And then if you play on a Steam Deck or a Switch, you're like, what is this? Where this pixels?
Yeah, because the thing is, you just lose 20 or 30% of the pixels, and so what you see is just like a rough approximation of what could be there. So there's like GPUs do this thing with like sub-pixel colors where like if you have to like try to render pixels that you can't render because you don't have enough pixels on the screen, like on the monitor to do it, then they almost do this kind of like blurring thing where they kind of like round out the colors to try to
approximate
to try to still capture some of the missing pixel information in the visuals, but it never. I mean, it never looks amazing.
I mean, the pixels aren't there. You know, there's only so much.
They're just not there. But yeah, I think the Switch 2, I think it is HD, right?
I think that's true. Yeah.
And
let's say if I assume some of our podcast people have them. So if you're listening to this, check out if you have Levelhead or Crashlands on Switch. Check it out on your Switch 2 and see. I guess let us know if it works because we don't know, and then also if it just looks better, you know, because it should.
Yeah, I think it's just Levelhead's just ahead of its time. You know,
yes, yeah,
and so I think Switch 2 is finally going to be when it really, really takes. So, anyways, I mean, ultimately, though, I think the Switch 2 launch has been good. It's like the news has been fine. There's been a few articles of people like trying to find something to be pissed off about, which has been funny. Like, GameStop employees are stapling the receipts to the box, and then sometimes it's damaging the screen. It's like, all
to
right.
be fair, that sucks. I don't know.
It sucks. That is incredibly dumb, but
it feels crazy to staple something to like a console box to me.
Yeah, just throw the receipt in the bag. It's more of a GameStop thing than a Switch thing.
Yeah,
and then people are like, why didn't they like package it better? So it's like, oh yeah, well, how come people are puncturing the box?
Yeah,
before you get it.
That's like the Amazon review thing where like some portion of those 1-star reviews are just people being like, it was delivered crushed. And it's like, I didn't.
Yep.
It's not about the product really at that point. That's the
Switch 2 sucks. When I bought it, I stabbed a hole in the box and then I opened it and then the fucking console is broken. I was like, yep, that'll happen. Yep. But yeah, I mean, I think I've heard good things about the Mario Kart game. I assume kind of over the course of this year, we'll see more new titles that are either Switch 2 exclusives or, that are like launching simultaneously on Switch 2. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, it's been fine, a little bit unremarkable, but it's good. Like it's a good
yeah, I mean, it is unremarkable. I mean, it's like we were talking before the podcast. It's kind of it's like iPhones getting better.
Yeah, they got an extra camera on there.
Yep, or moved around a little bit. Yeah, so it's
Which speaking of which, I think we have WWDC next week, so I assume we'll see how many more cameras are on the new.
I'm gonna guess like at least 12 on the back. I just want a panel of eyes, so it just feels like some kind of horror, thing. Just like let's go.
We were joking the other day that like iPhones finally hit a threshold where they have more gigabytes of RAM than cameras. So maybe they'll balance it out. Maybe they'll either take some RAM away or add more cameras because the universe must be brought back into balance.
Must be restored.
Yeah. And they've kind of given up on Apple Intelligence, which is just ChatGPT crammed into an iPhone.
Have they? I feel like we'll find out next week during the.
Yeah.
Well, they've decided to just brand. Well, they haven't talked about it. They haven't given up on talking about it because, for example, they were like, we have this new feature where we use Apple Intelligence to estimate how long until your phone gets charged, which is
you
not
don't need AI for that.
Yeah, like Android phones have had that for like 15 years because it's just like a voltage metering measurement thing, right? So,
wait, do iPhones not tell you?
They didn't until Apple Intelligence came along, and then they can use Apple Intelligence to tell you how long.
So this is actually probably a branding thing where Apple Intelligence doesn't refer specifically to LLM shit.
Right. It's just whenever they put new stuff in,
they're like a smart thing is happening, right? So we'll just put it into the Apple Intelligence banner. Yeah, every once in a while I am like just when I hear about some new thing coming to iPhones, I am literally just baffled and confused because I'm like, what do you mean?
How did you not have that?
What do you mean you didn't have?
Yeah.
Because was it last year that they could, people could reorganize their apps on
the most recent iOS update was you can reorganize icons on your home under certain constraints. Like,
under certain constraints.
But
I remember I heard that.
I've had Android phones for
I don't even believe
15,
that.
since like 2012, and I was like, I didn't even realize you couldn't do that.
It's still hard to believe. leave.
I was trying to imagine not being allowed to reorganize stuff
no thanks.
For 15 years. Like if I'd been an iPhone person.
I mean, to be fair, it would be a big deal
15
if
years of
suddenly
my
you
life.
could.
Yeah, but just the idea of like my tolerance for my tolerance for my software not letting me do what I want is so low. It is as close to zero as you can get. I'm just imagining like if that was my go-to device, I was trying to do stuff on it and I couldn't put the thing where I wanted it to be. I think I would just be mad 24/7, you know, like every time I pulled it out, I'd be like, God damn it.
Which to be fair to Apple, like we've talked in the past about how all of us kind of ended up on the Android side of things because we could compile games from Windows to Android directly without needing to get a Mac. And like it's kind of their walled garden approach to everything, kind of like walled us out of it early, and then we've just kind of stayed where we are. Well,
especially in the earlier days with like Android and Google, in those days, their whole thing was Google's going to be everywhere, right? That was like they were trying to because they were a software company first and not a hardware company. Yeah. And so their whole thing was like interop, being on everything. We've got a browser. It works on everything. You know, like that was their whole strategy. And so for me, especially at that time, I was like, fuck yeah. So I was all in because I was like, if I've got a Google account, I can use it everywhere, you know?
It's kind of like, 15 years ago, there was like 2 theme parks. One had like giant fortress walls around it and then a person taking tickets for like $2,000 at the door. And then right next to it was a park that also had all the same fucking rides, and you could just walk right in, right? Yeah. And we were like, "Yeah, we'll just go to that one." So, anyways, we don't need to rag on Apple too much, but a bunch of goofballs. All right, so let's get to some questions. Our questions come from our listeners over at podcast.bscotch.net. Highest upvoted question comes from Jumpylumpa Leapylow. Dageki's just on a roll. I think Dageki's had like 3 in the last several episodes. What are you brothers getting from these podcasts? I hope it's something amazing and also money.
It's not that
money.
It's not money.
Money.
Which is not to say people do give us donations. You know, we talk about them at the front. And if you want to give us more, we'd love it. Go to MoneyGram and do it. But, you know, in terms of like, it's a weekly thing. It takes all 3 of our time for like an hour and a half, you know, to do it. So it takes a big chunk out of our day that we could be spending on making games or doing something else. It has to get edited. We have to spend time getting it published. We have to pay for podcast hosting, you know, like, so it's a net financial loss by a wide margin for sure. Right. So yeah, unfortunately it's not that. What we've gotten historically out of, which I think is still true, is that over the years, we were constantly shifting our relationship to each other in the studio in terms of like what the work looks like. Right. And so Sam and Seth in particular are usually working very close together because they're making the games. But even then, sometimes Sam is in like an art silo or Seth is in a programming silo. And so stuff gets kind of separated apart. And then I'm kind of always off doing related
crazy shit,
but fairly non-overlapping stuff. Right. And so the podcast has historically been a way for us to just on a really frequent cadence, just sit down, shoot the shit, talk about whatever we're thinking about, talk about what we think the industry is doing. It gives us a reason, because if we didn't have this, I would pay less attention to the industry. I would,
100%. Yeah.
We wouldn't have this like structured opportunity for us to like shoot the shit, talking about what we think is going on in the industry.
Yeah, it's basically a structured water cooler chat because none of us hang out at a water cooler. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's a weekly.
Yeah, because before we record, we usually spend like 20 minutes or so just kind of catching up on whatever else and just chatting.
Deciding what to talk about.
Yeah. So it's mainly just sort of hanging. It's just for us to hang out.
Yeah. Well, because like if we didn't have, because it's all about getting, you know, incentives nicely aligned, right? Because if we plan to have that chat just like non-publicly, right? Then it's something like it's really easy to be like, not this week. You know,
it's a meeting.
Yeah,
it's a meeting. Yeah. But by turning it into sort of an entertainment product, right, that has now been around long enough that unless we're going to quit completely, we got to do it every week. Because the moment we stop doing it every week, we get half of our listeners come back, you know, right? So we now have this like nicely aligned collection of incentives that give us what we want, which is we want to have it feel important that we sit down and do this every week. And by doing this format, it's all naturally aligned.
Yeah, I will say that there have been multiple times during various, I mean, it's been 10 years, you know. doing this, that where we had enough going on or like enough random bullshit was happening that we had those conversations like, should we just stop doing this podcast? Because it does take time, right? Yep. And there was, especially in the early days, we were editing it ourselves too, which added another like hour and a half to the fucking and uploading and all that. It's like added basically 2 hours to it. So it was even more sort of temporally expensive back then. And while we've offloaded basically everything post podcast recording to various people, so it costs money and stuff. So yeah, it's every so often that opportunity, the sharpness of the opportunity cost does come up. We'd be like, man, it would be nice to be able to fucking not this week because we got X, Y, or Z happening. But typically, I mean, anytime we've started getting into that space, largely what we've done is just kind of back up and be like, okay, can we still do it, but let's just contain it a little bit better. Because from listening to us talk, we could just fucking go for 2 hours if we wanted to. So sometimes it's just about getting a little bit sharper boundaries on the thing, so it is a little more workable in the workday as well.
And it's a signal. Like if we're saying like, yeah, we literally can't spare an hour this week. It's like, all right, well, why? Like what has gone off the rails to make that such a problem? Can we fix that instead of staying in a panicked, urgent, everything's on fire state and then just skipping the podcast? Like, can we fix the problem at the source?
Yeah, it's like a structured approach to make sure that we're grounded, both in terms of like relationship with each other, but also just like you said, it's like finding whenever those urgent points rise up. It's a
canary in the coal mine. It's like if we're thinking about ditching the podcast, and probably some other shit is going wrong that we need to figure out. But I think also another benefit of it is that it just is a humanizing thing because man, people
are bad.
People really do not treat game developers well. Well, they don't treat people well. And for whatever reason, people think that like because they spent $5 on your game or whatever, now they get to just send you death threats or whatever the case may be because you made a design decision they don't like, or because you have a different price on one platform versus another, whatever the case may be.
Everything's in bad faith for some portion of gamers, basically. And it's like, there's a mental toll there that is very real.
Yeah. And I think it's just an extension of like what it's like to live in the world today where almost everything that you get comes from some faceless company that literally does not give a shit about you. And so people kind of are accustomed to responding in kind, which is, well, you don't care about me, I don't care about you. Like we have a transactional relationship, and if I feel like I'm not getting what I need from this transaction, then it's because of malicious intent and blah, blah, blah.
People's default is to basically just start by screaving at people.
Yeah, just start at 11.
As opposed to just and again, like contextually, sure, the incentives are definitely have pushed people there.
I understand. I understand why it's like
I understand on an individual basis, It's not something I do, whatever.
Yeah, the idea, okay. I would never. Yeah, it's the idea of it. Like I could be so mad about a thing that's happening, but by the time I interact with a person, also when you interact with a person, that person's never the fucking responsible party. Never. Even in our own studio, if you're mad about something, you're going to end up talking to one of our QA team, right? Because that's the front line of like figuring out what's going on with the community and with support issues, right? So,
granted, it's a small team and they're only one layer removed from us.
Yes, right? Sure, right? But even if we were being malicious about it, which we're not about anything that goes wrong, right? Even if we were, like, it's Sam and Seth largely making the thing.
That's true.
That people are angry about. But Sam and Seth are not the ones digging through the feedback, trying to see if people need help and all that kind of stuff, because they're busy working on the next update and trying to do the next thing, right?
Also, because it is emotionally fucking exhausting.
Oh, it's
I'm be honest, like
soul crushing.
Reading through like Steam reviews and stuff to find actual good feedback about the game that we can integrate is a poisonous activity that will fuck up your whole day. So it's like it's a rough. It's a very rough.
I've read about like Facebook moderators, where their job is anytime somebody, but they have a quota, because it's like there's so many posts being posted, and if they have say 10,000 moderators, then it's like, all right, you need to like make a decision about any given post within like 3 seconds or something like that. And so that means that, and then like as soon as you like make a decision, then you're shown the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, right? And so all you're seeing are things that have been reported as violent, as harassment.
I can't imagine the mental toll on that on a social media scale is insane. I can't imagine.
Yeah. And so like we get like just the tiniest taste of that by like reading through our negative game reviews, where it's just like so much of it is just, I would just say bullying.
Yeah, but it is like a layer removed, right? Because the people who are doing it aren't targeting us specifically. It's just like the devs, right? So there is a layer removed there that allows us to have a sense of it not being fully directed, right? Because if you're otherwise, like it would be infinitely worse of an experience. But it is still like what? Just what?
Yeah, but like I'll never forget when we made Talify 2 a free game. Yeah, and what we did was this was before the podcast, but it was I think it was $2.99 normally. And then we made it a free game where I think you could just like buy coins. I think it was. I think that's how it works.
There's something to buy in it, or or maybe there was ads or something.
And we didn't change anything, so we didn't like make it harder to get the coins or whatever. We just like we just made the game free and just gave you a way to buy the coins with money. So essentially, we just gave the game away. It was basically because revenue wise, it did not pan out.
And it wasn't paying out before that either, but
I think it made like $3,000.
Didn't we do that when I got sick? Like because
no, we did it. We did it, I think, after Quadrupus Rampage, which we made as a free game, and then we saw that 1.5 million people were playing Quadrupus, and 1,500 people are playing Talify. We were like, oh, right, and also because we saw that we had like a 98% piracy rate for Talify, and so we're like, oh, we made a free game anyway, so why don't we just make it free? But then, we had, when we made that change, we had somebody write us and say, I hope you get cancer.
Yeah.
because free to play is it's the scum of the gaming industry. And I can't believe you guys are, bowing to this trend or whatever.
Yeah. Which, I did. And so
there you go.
I gotta say, to be clear, the difference in like utility scale of like $2 for a game versus like
wishing somebody
2 years of cancer treatment. I'm gonna be honest, there's really a lack of parity.
Well, and what the person was mad about was largely that they had bought the game for $3 and now it's free. So if they had waited 6 months, they could have saved $3. That was, and so.
Well, and we were about this with sales too, right? Because we just launched Crashlands 2, and the first question we have to address now, because on Steam is a culture of games being on sale. Like that's how you sell games. There's your launch and then 1 million sales for the rest of time, right? And so we have to answer the question, what's the first sale we participate in or the first sale we do ourselves, right? Because if we wait too long from the launch, then we miss out on
a bad idea.
A lot of potential revenue that we could have generated. If we do it too close, then we have people who bought the game who are now very angry, right? And because they could have saved $5 or whatever, right? And those people get fucking mean.
If you're verbally attacking somebody or wishing cancer upon them or blah, 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 because of literally a couple of dollars.
It's just
check your shit.
And for a video game.
For a video game, which you've already played and are done with. So, yeah, I don't know. It's so like doing stuff like the podcast and trying to get ourselves out there as human beings who are doing our best to try to make cool stuff for people. And we do have to sell stuff. We do have to make money so that we can keep doing this.
Even though those directly mean things like are soul crushing, the ones that still make me because those are soul crushing, but the ones that make me the angriest are the ones that are mad about the idea of game developers trying to make a living doing it, because the idea like you should do it for the love of doing it, like that.
It's just weird because you're like, well,
makes
where does that go?
Yeah, well, because these are people who want the stuff that is being made by artists and writers and game developers and stuff, right? They want that stuff and they want it to be extremely good, right? And at the same time, they just truly
do not value the
deepest
fact that it takes
hearts.
Time to,
I mean, this is the same logic.
Nobody should get paid to do it. It's just it makes me.
It's
so
the same logic as people saying like there should be jobs that don't pay a living wage, right?
Yeah,
like, because they're for high school students and they should only pay $7 an hour and being a barista or whatever, right? And it's like, okay, but like, what about all year during the day when these kids are supposed to be at school. Do you want Starbucks to be closed just for like 8 hours a day? I don't think so. So if you want these things in your life and you want them to be good, then you got to pay for them.
Yeah.
And you need people to be able to sustain themselves doing that thing, right? Yeah. You can't have it both ways. You can't say this should exist and it should be great, and also nobody should make a living doing it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like on the podcast then gives us, because it doesn't inoculate like the broad community, right, against this kind of behavior, but it does give us the
because most people
like
don't
Discord.
listen to the podcast.
Exactly. Like it's like the tiniest fraction of our total player base, right? But it does make it so that the most active people, who are the ones who are also then present in the Discord, present on moderators on Reddit, whatever else, are basically we're more I don't know, we're closer to them actually than most devs would be with like a moderation team or whatever else, because
it's largely parasocial, right? Because
it's parasocial, yeah.
But
because it's a thing, but
it's a way that we get to create goodwill among our most ardent of community members, right?
But it also like a little bit, from the
it just gives us a little something. But also it allows us to sort of really cost effectively stay in touch, again, kind of parasocially, right? But stay in touch with other developers also, right? Mm-hmm. And because it used to be back in the day, pre-COVID days when we were going to events all the time and stuff. It was surprising because like there aren't that many listeners to this podcast, right? But a lot of them are indie game devs, and so it was always remarkable just how often we would talk to somebody. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, I was listening to your podcast," right? like wildly frequently.
Basically, every game dev event we went to, if it was more like 1,000 people there, somehow someone would be like, "Oh yeah, I listened to your guys' podcast last week, and you're talking about this thing. What do you think about?"
Yes, it just happened all the time
because it doesn't happen ever. Outside of that context, it's not. There's no fame here, and so it's very funny to show up at an industry event and have that happen. It's useful.
Yeah, and so it ends up being a useful way for us to sort of stay in touch with, and also by publicly talking about stuff and trying to share what's going on. It also gives people who are listening the opportunity to be like, "Oh, I have an opinion about that," and then tell us that, which every once in a while is remarkably insightful. And it's stuff where it's like, it's the kind of thing where, we can sit down with one of our developer friends for an hour once a quarter or whatever, right? To like talk shop, see what they've been up to, whatever. The reality has always been that stuff on our side, on their side, falls away so quickly because we're all so busy trying to do the work that we just don't. We're just not doing it, right? And this just provides a mechanism by which we still get to have like a lot of aspects of that in this sort of like less directed way, but where we still get some of it. And it all comes from the same. It's like all of this comes out of the same thing, which is we sit down for an hour a week just to talk shop about the industry in the studio. And all of these things come out of it. And none of them, and this is the whole idea we talk about the games too, right? Where it's like, there's nothing you can do to sell your game, right? There's a million things you should do that hopefully all add together.
There's no one thing.
But there's no one thing. There's a million things that add together. And like the podcast in this format is like a million things adding together, right? Yeah. Is it actually worth doing given all of that? Impossible to say. But we like doing
Hard to quantify.
Yep. we like doing it. It's fun. If it ever became not fun, we would stop because I think it's only not obvious that the value is very high in terms of like impact on us and the studio and the long-term survival of our team and all that kind of stuff. Right. So the moment we stopped having fun, we would stop doing it.
It itself, sort of like enclosed in itself, has never not been fun. It's just sometimes the fact that it happens in context with, fucking everything else is not fun. You know what I mean? Like there's a stress thing there.
You're trying to balance.
It's the regularity of the commitment,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Next question comes from ButterMilkLoveNugget.
I don't know about that.
Who says, I don't know about that. Who says, if and when Crashlands 2 becomes a blockbuster hit, do you think anyone will be making any mods to the game to further enhance or change the experience? And how do you feel about this in games in general? Love you guys and hope this year is amazing for you all. So this question was probably asked before Crashlands 2 launched.
Yeah, probably.
So
regardless
I think this is kind of
status, just the mod.
Yeah, it's kind of decoupled from the popularity of the game. Crashlands 2 is set up in a way that it could be potentially modded because we talked in the past about how we decoupled the data of the game from the code of the game. Mm-hmm. So as a simple example, there's only one object in the game that handles creatures. And then in this separate file, every creature has its own blob of data that kind of gets eaten by this object to represent these different types of creatures in the game. And so if you can crack open that file in the game's directory, which is just sitting there, it's not even encrypted. Like you just open it. Well, you might not be able to because it's fucking huge.
Yeah. It crashes a lot of editors.
Yeah. So that's something that I think the downside of it is that there's only one of that file, and the game currently assumes that there's only one of that file. So if you wanted to do a mod where basically you made a copy of that file and changed a bunch of stuff, and then you could choose when you play the game which one of those files to use, that would be kind of like the way that we would support it. There's extra layers of complication with that, primarily because of the game being a cross-platform game. So you wouldn't really be able to do that on
just everywhere else.
So we would have to basically the game would have to recognize that you were playing a modded file and then not put that file into the cloud into our Rumpus servers and stuff like that. And that's something that it'll kind of depend on demand from players, and it'll depend on because we have some upcoming, obviously, like we were just saying. We always have upcoming sales and stuff, and we haven't even hit the first sale of Crashlands 2. The first
which will be the summer sale, by the way. So it'll be coming up here.
Yeah, so it'll all kind of depend on where the game goes from here. I say we do love modding just as a thing, because it blows the lid off of what's possible in the game, and because people modded the original Crashlands in China to translate it. Yeah, that's what caused the franchise to gain so much popularity in China. And we didn't make it moddable. They just hacked the shit out of it. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know. And same with Levelhead. There's a quote mod that people use called Chaos Head, which is a separate program that people use to create levels that are outside of the constraints that we set.
Unbounded.
I mean, there's still a lot of it is still within the constraints, right? But because the editor doesn't really violate a lot of the constraints, it violates some.
It lets people make levels that are much bigger than we allow. We put those constraints in there for specific reasons. And players are like, yeah, but who gives a shit? And so then
that's the fun part about mods, right? It's all this very personalized. I want the game to be shaped a little bit more like this, whatever else.
Yeah.
I think to me, I've always thought mods, I think they're just phenomenal. Whether it's stuff where it's now there's basically an endless stream of small quality of life tweaks that you could just go get for a game that you really already love. Inventory not fucking weighing anything in Baldur's Gate, sign me up. All that stuff, always fun. And because a developer doesn't have to somehow know and directly support every one of those possible things, which is a crazy ask, then it basically allows the community to take ownership of the game in a really direct way, which is really cool. So in my mind, it's I think depending on how stuff shapes out with the next two updates, with the first couple sales with Crashlands 2, it is something we've talked about is basically figuring out how to do it in the context of Crashlands 2, potentially, once we're kind of wrapped on all the post-launch free update stuff we're doing.
On this one, I think mod support, like official built-in mod support, is a lot like localization. Right, which is if you know what it's going to mean to have that be part of how the game works, so that you do it early. I mean, there's a plan for it. There's an architectural support for it, right?
Yes.
Then it makes everything a little more complicated the whole time, but that's during the rest of development. But it's infinitely easier than coming back after you've made the game and being okay, time to add new languages, right? Because architecturally, the game will not support it, and it's going to be
but especially architecturally with how Crashlands 2 already is set up to such point.
We've got
in a way that
we've got a piece of that, right?
Yeah. It's set up but it's one of those the conversion would not be as insane as what the original Crashlands.
Well, it depends on what we mean, right? Because on the degree of support and that kind of stuff, right? Because right now, you can go open up that file and just start tweaking stuff, right? But what that means practically is you're really limited to what you can't easily add different sprites or new kinds of creatures or whatever, right? You can tweak the things that make them behave the way that they do and make that kind of stuff, right? But you can't easily change the content in a really significant way. And that's the kind of stuff that if you're going to go all in on modding. Then like architecturally, you'd actually design a game so that there's like a place that where assets get like scooped up, right? And like there'd be like mechanisms that you build in so that the game is just a lot more dynamically sort of constructed in the first place. And it's interesting to note that some of the really big titles that have like either direct mod support or people can just kind of easily figure out how to do mod support, because those games are made by lots of people. The same kind of stuff that supports having a large team of content makers, right? Kind of inherently also is what you need for mod support, which is also why like, we've struggled with it because we haven't needed to build our games architecturally to support like a large team of content creators. And so our games are not architecturally like out of the gate in a way where they're like ready for mods. But this comes the closest for those same reasons, which is we needed to make it so that both of our artists and our writer could, and our sound people could like easily add stuff to the game. And so we have like Crashlands 2 is our first step towards that, right? But it's still not designed to be like, oh, we've got 5 programmers making like kinds of creatures and like that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, it's not a thing currently where it's not like we flip it on. You know what I mean? Like there'd be a mountain of work to do it, but the potential downstream effect for it is large, right? In terms of like it's the sort of thing that then the community can just continue adding cool shit to the game, just like indefinitely. You see this with Terraria or whatever else. It really, I can think it could, if you got a good game that is doing well, that is like primed for being able to like fully support mods, then I think there's a good argument for it, especially given that doing so would then teach us, it's like when we did localization or even with all the scale stuff we managed with Crashlands 2, it teaches us how to architect games that we make in the future if we want to have that at the forefront, where then just by virtue of having made it the way we made it, it's like already moddable, which is really, that's where you want to end up at the end. Like if you could just fucking be moddable the whole time and it wasn't like hard, you know what I mean? Like that's where
that's what things, and if the game is architected in such a way, it also tends to make things like QA easier because QA can like really get their hands into stuff, right? It can also make things more absurd because people can do stuff that are like really not intended to be supported, right?
Yep.
But there are all these sort of side benefits that you get out of having a game architected in such a way, but it also has to be possible given how the game engine works, given how like the team knows how to build things. And so for us, one of the biggest limitations has always been game maker support for how it loads and manages content after it starts. After a build, right? Yeah. So, because with the build, like everything it's all put into texture pages automatic, like all this stuff happens automatically and then is efficiently or relatively efficiently handled when the game is running. But if you want to do stuff like make it so it could scoop up a page of different files for content or different images for sprites, or even much harder, like different spine animations and resources and stuff, right? There are ways to allow it to do that kind of stuff, but they're incredibly resource inefficient in the game. And so a lot of what we've been waiting for is for better features on the game maker side to be able to.
Yeah, I was gonna say if we do end up doing it, it genuinely would like we'd have to do a collaboration with the game maker to like just talk to them about the fuck how could we conceive of doing this. We'd probably have to talk to a couple other game maker devs who have managed to do it, even some like the more hacky contractors who just do like whack shit like Chef multiplayer and stuff, and just it'd basically be like a bit of a R&D thing to figure out.
If we added mod support, it would probably be a few months of work, and we wouldn't be adding anything else to the game in that time. I think that's why we wouldn't be making any new games either. So
yeah. Well, I think the interesting thing though with Crashlands 2 is that we actually could be adding stuff to the game in that time because it's already set up so that stuff doesn't have to just flow through engineering. So that's the big
rather all of my time would go into the mod.
Yes, that's wouldn't be able to add anything to the game. But if we're just doing like a giant, if it's like basically some combo of like content push and then just poking our way around on that thing, then we could essentially do it. But again, it kind of depends on how the next couple months and the next couple updates go with Crashlands 2. Yeah. So we'll make a call when we get there.
Yeah, we love the idea. It will be hard. We will see.
Yep.
So that's all the time we have for this week. We'd like to thank our producers Fat Bard and Sampa Acosta for putting the podcast together. And thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, just go to podcast.bscotch.net, where we have links to the community Discord, a way for you to donate to support the podcast, and links to the archives. And if you haven't yet, head on over to Steam, the App Store, and Google Play, and pick up a copy of Crashlands 2, and if you've already got it, give it a thumbs up, give it a good review. It helps us quite a bit, and we appreciate it. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.